Welcome back to Winnipeg Direct On Shot, where we examine and question policies and issues that affect people across the province and across the country. On our panel, we welcome Earl Mallon, Reeve of the Municipality of South Cyprus, Robert Dewsbury, Mayor of the Town of Glenborough, and Curtis Hall, Project Manager for Climate Change Connection. Thank you for being here, gentlemen.
Welcome.
One of the ongoing issues for rural Manitobans has been the environmental effects of floodwaters throughout the province, especially in light of the abundant precipitation southern areas have been receiving. Problems associated with the surge of excess water have included threats to water quality from the wells and sandpoints, struggles to deal with overflowing sewage lagoons and runoff from farm fields containing fertilizers and other chemicals into the marshes and rivers. So before we get started here, Earl, I'm hoping that you can explain to our viewers exactly where your municipality is in relation to Winnipeg.
Okay, we're 110 miles west down number 2 highway. And the Winnipeggers will best know it because it's 7 miles straight south of Spruce Woods Park, when Spruce Woods Park is open.
Okay.
Right now it's underwater.
So, Mayor of Glenborough, what's unique about your town?
The first thing that comes to mind, if you drove through our beautiful little town, you'd wonder if there was any water damage, but 60% of the houses have water in the basement. And
wow, 60%?
Yes, and we've had multiple sewer breaks. And I would like to add to Earl's comment, we're adjacent to the Manitoba Desert, which is by Spruce Woods Park.
The one and only Manitoba Desert everyone knows about.
Yes.
So Curtis, what do you see as the greatest environmental concern from the floodwaters this year?
Well, you mentioned them in your introductory statements, that it has to do with contamination of water. The two main contamination points being the fresh water in the aquifer and also in the river system. So anything that has been flooded will pick up whatever fertilizers or chemicals or gasoline, diesel, etc., and put it into the river system and eventually into the lakes.
So Earl, in terms of damage to your area, how hard hit were you guys?
Well, our seeding process is way behind schedule. Right across the province, as well as the arm of South Cyprus, 70% seeded this year would be a top in most areas. We've got 35 to 45% unseeded acres, which is a great economic detriment to our farming industry in our part of the country. So that's one thing of the high water done. We've also lost 2 major river crossings, with the Stockton Ferry being out of commission because of high water. It's one of our unique parts of our municipality. We got the last remaining municipally operated ferry in the southwestern part of Manitoba, and we also lost a heritage bridge at Treesbank that was built in 1921, and both of them have been flooded away because of high water. So the environmental impact of those being gone is causing hardship to the farmers and people who commute back and forth to Brandon and Shiloh to work, because it adds a lot of miles to their trips and uses more gasoline and harder on the roads, and it is a detriment to the environment that way.
Mm-hmm. Robert, what is the town doing to deal with the flood devastation there?
Well, we've had to empty the lagoon 5 times in 2 months, which is normally, it's never happened before since 1957. And we've had to put supplementary pumps in, which were manned by counselors and pretty near anybody who could volunteer their time to run it. And we've repaired the sewers as much as we can. And it's been a harried, hectic time.
Absolutely. Curtis, are there any long-term strategies you know of to deal with rising groundwater level?
Well, there's a matter of scale at issue here, because this year's flood, I think, is unprecedented, and it's hard to say how much more severe a flood we might anticipate in the future based on the climate change models. But there are strategies that should be considered, maybe for more moderate flood years, things like use of wetlands for retention of water, and rather than the drainage systems putting tremendous burden on the streams and rivers in the spring. So what we've done is we've increased the drainage dramatically over the last 50 to 100 years, and all that water goes into the streams, and then the streams can't take it. So there are strategies for other maintaining wetlands or even expanding the wetland areas, so that we've got more water retention areas that can sop up, that are viable habitats that can sop up a bit of this excess water.
Earl, I understand there has been some water contamination. Have any humans or livestock, for that matter, been affected in your area?
Not that I'm aware of to this point, but I know that most everybody in our area is on a sand point for domestic water, and they're all been tested, and at this point they're still fine, but we don't know for how much longer until they start getting negative reactions to the runoff and whatnot.
Curtis, what does this do to the environment when the water is contaminated?
Well, it has a couple of significant impacts. One is contamination of drinking water, and the other one is the increased fertilization of lakes and streams. So you get blooms of algae, and of greatest concerns is the blue-green algae and eutrophication of lakes.
So, Robert, what is being done in your area to ensure that the drinking water is safe to drink for the people living in Glenborough?
I guess repairing the sewer systems as quickly as we could to keep that moving, and helping get the drinking water samples all tested. We encouraged every household to have their water tested because they're all independent units.
So have the farmers' fields been affected by this at all with regards to the contamination?
I wouldn't think they would be affected a great deal as far as contamination goes. But it's too wet to really find out.
Yeah. So Curtis, when a field is contaminated with bad water, what then? How does that affect? What's the ripple down effect?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't answer your question, Megan.
That's totally fine. So Robert, could you suggest what the costs have been to your town with regards to the flood damage?
Not in exact dollars, but somewhere between 7 and 10 times what we budgeted for repairs. The streets were all damaged and horribly. It went a long way to get caught up.
Yeah.
Many years.
And Earl, how do you feel the province has responded? Are you happy with the way that they've handled the flood this year?
Well, they haven't really handled it to this point because we're still in flood stage. Every time we talk to the province, they indicate that they will deal with it when the water goes down, but the water hasn't gone down yet. Like we're into the 90 some odd days of water on the rivers above flood stage. So until the water goes down, we won't really know how the government's going to react until they can see what the damage really has been.
Now, did Glenborough have any military personnel out there to help them sandbag at all?
No.
Did you guys ask for help?
We didn't have to sandbag in our town.
In our area, the unique part of the surface water, and it not only affects, if I can kind of interject here a bit, Bob, it doesn't only affect the village, but it affects the farmland, and it's surface water. Like there's a lot of areas that initially were seeded, but as the rains came and the surface water percolates up through the ground, and now it's flooded the land. And the water table has come up so high that and it won't go down. And water table on the Assiniboine Delta aquifer will not go down until the streams and rivers get down to a normal level, because that's their only flow is to the stream and rivers eventually.
So Earl, what flood management plans were in place prior to the flood of 2011?
For the municipality?
Yep.
Just warning of the river flat peoples, the farmlands in the river flats, that it was going to be flooded, because there's really nothing you can do. They're on the river plain, on the flood plain, and as Curtis indicated, this has happened before in the 1800s, and this is just one of these unique things that has happened again. we have never seen the water this high for anybody to have dealt with it before.
You know, it has happened before and it's happening now, but since I deal in climate change, I looking at the computer models for projections into the future, we have to really seriously consider the likelihood of more frequent occurrences of flood and drought going into the future, and consider the infrastructure and the emergency measures that we have in place to deal with events that in the past might have been very rare, which may well become more frequent in the future.
So what are some flood management plans that you would like to see the province and the city, for that matter, put in place?
Well, for a more moderate year, increasing or reintroducing some wetlands. We've gotten rid of a lot of wetlands, and that's one strategy for managing water and also increasing habitat, and which also, by the way, can have an economic. Like, it's not just a matter of taking productive farmland out of production, but rather there's a study that's just been completed by the International Institute for Sustainable Development using the Netley Marsh, where they harvested cattails. And the cattails actually took phosphorus out of the water and stored it in the cattails. The cattails were harvested and used as biomass fuel. And the ash still had the phosphorus, and then the phosphorus could be returned to the land. So you've got a situation where you've got a viable marsh that can be used for water retention. The biomass from that marsh being harvested as an potential economic source for producers, and then also a way for cleaning phosphorus out of the water system. So if we investigate these, there are potential economic benefits from these strategies.
So Robert, how has the flood affected your sewage lagoon?
It just filled it in very short order. It's never supposed to be full.
And so where does that excess water and or sewage, where is that going?
I think it's being pumped, not anymore, but it was pumped into a tributary of the Assiniboine River. And that was done with the approval of the water conservation and stewardship.
So the sewage is being pumped into the Assiniboine River?
It's actually not sewage, because there's so much groundwater mixed in. It didn't even show on the tests we did on it that it was sewage. It was.
But just to clarify, it is coming from the sewage lagoon?
It does come from the sewage lagoon.
So, Curtis, what does that mean for the Assiniboine River?
Well, any times you've got increased nutrients entering the river system, it encourages the growth of algae.
Well, sadly, that is all the time we have here on Winnipeg Direct. I'm your host, Megan Duffy. I'd like to thank all my guests for being here. And if you have any topics or stories you'd like us to cover, find us on Facebook or on Twitter and send us a message. Thanks for joining us.